Hello and welcome to Strictly Staffing, a new web series for search and staffing leaders. My name is Brad Messenger from our global customer marketing team at LinkedIn, and I will be your host for the show today. Right now, the business of recruitment is changing at a feverish pace. The ever-evolving client and candidate needs, the rise of technology, new operating models, fierce competition. I'm sure many of you are experiencing the whiplash of responding to these changes and more at your agencies every single day. It's a challenge to figure out how to best keep pace with customers, make decisions on where to invest, what growth levers to pull, while still keeping your team members happy and productive. And that's why we developed this show, Strictly Staffing, to bring together staffing professionals from around the globe to share their ideas, to gain inspiration, and to elevate the community together. Over time, we'll cover a wide range of pressing topics, but today we're focusing on a theme that sits at the epicenter of recruitment, and that's skills. We're going to count down the top in-demand skills for companies in 2019. We're going to hear about the latest skills research from Staffing Industry Analysts, and we're even going to sit down with a few of my favorite executives from Kelly Services and ASGN Creative Circle. We're going to share their perspective on the trends that are shaping the market and their business. I don't think we could have assembled a better group to cover this topic. And by spending the next 45 minutes with us, we hope that you will not only learn something new, but that you'll take some inspiration back to your organization. So if you have thoughts, ideas, comments, questions, please feel free to join the conversation, give us feedback, and of course, use the hashtag StrictlyStaffing on LinkedIn. Plus, we're live right now, and we'll be addressing your questions at the end of the show. So go ahead and send them in, and we'll be sharing them with some of our speakers later. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our very first special guest, Barry Asin. He is one of the foremost experts in the staffing community with more than 20 years of experience. Currently, he's the president of Staffing Industry Analysts, the leading independent research firm in our space. He's the co-author of the book, Breaking Through Leadership Disciplines from Top-Performing Staffing Agencies. And today, he's going to share the findings from his book and what truly sets apart top-performing staffing agencies from the rest. Throughout the program today, we're also going to be unveiling the top 10 most in-demand skills for 2019, according to LinkedIn. In a moment, I'm going to roll the first half of those skills, and then following Barry's presentation, you're going to get to see the remainder. Let us know if those skills line up with the ones that your clients are seeking, and let's go ahead and see the most in-demand skills list for the year.
Hi, everyone. At Staffing Industry Analysts, we spend a lot of time thinking about the changes and the developments in the staffing industry. One of the questions that's been most on my mind is why do so few staffing firms make it to the top of the industry? There are 19,000 staffing firms in the United States. We track every year the largest staffing firms in the industry. Only 140 and latest 150 or so make it to over 100 million. The vast majority of staffing firms are under 5 million in revenue. What's different about those that grow? I've been thinking about that for many years, and I want to share with you some of the thoughts that we've had towards that end. So the first thing is to know that the companies, not only is it about companies that have grown to be the top, but it's also companies like Allegis and companies like Apex and Insight Global who have a similar model to those large companies. And Allegis is a great story, and it's a company that that is over 10 billion in revenue right now, the market leader in the United States. Apex and Insight are companies that have followed a very similar model, and they've far outgrown the industry over the past decade or so. So what's different about those sorts of firms? And that's what led me, along with my colleague Mike Cleland, to take a detailed look at some of the companies that have grown from that journey of 0 to over 100 million. And we decided to do some in-depth interviews with those firms and find out what is it about those organizations that have gone from startup to the top 2% of the industry. We studied companies that are on our fastest growing staffing firm list and decided to write the book about them. My short summary is that it's the skills of the leader and the leadership team that makes the difference. And so let me talk now a little bit more about how those leadership teams transform those companies over time. First off, it's important to know that growth comes in predictable stages. Growth for staffing businesses is not always up. But if you think about leadership maturity over time, it starts with companies that are often at the very beginning owner-operator dependent. And this is often a lifestyle business for the owner-operator. And the growth is all about their bandwidth and their ability of the leader. Organizations then, if they're able to grow to independent operation, where they have an operation that can function without the leader present all the time. Or next stage would be organic scale, where they're able to replicate the operation, typically in multiple markets or geographies. And finally, companies get to, as they grow, strategic expansion, the ability to add whole new business lines to their operation. So those are the stages of growth. For the vast majority of firms, they never make it beyond that owner-operator dependent stage. And you've got to grow the skills and the capabilities of the organization over time. So what's different about those firms who were able to break through those barriers to growth and move ahead of the pack? We saw in the companies that we looked at 5 key disciplines among the leaders in that who were able to grow. Those were the disciplines of commitment and commitment to growth, direction, which is really about strategy, culture, and particularly high performance culture, talent development, growing the internal talent of the organization, and execution. So let's talk first about the discipline of commitment. So this discipline is really the most personal discipline of all. And it starts at the top with the leader, the CEO, or the top couple of people in the organization. It might go without saying, but they need to want to grow the business and be willing to take the risks and the sacrifices to enable that growth. Staffing firms don't just grow on their own. And that commitment shows up in things like really practical things, like being willing to reinvest in the business, to make that decision as an owner-operator. Are you going to have that vacation home, or are you going to invest in the business? Are you going to hire more recruiters? And it also often means doing the difficult things that need to be done for the growth of the business. Are you about providing a place for your friends and relatives to work, or are you about making sure you've got the best possible talent? So that commitment is easy to say and hard to do. Companies, they don't grow by accident. And as they grow, and it gets harder for the leader to see every day all the people in the organization, it becomes increasingly important to have a really clear purpose to inspire others and give them a reason to come and do their job every day. So that's the discipline of commitment, a critical first step. Do you want to grow? The next thing is to pick the strategy that you need. And that's what direction is all about. Do you have a winning strategy and the resources to execute it? What customers are you going to serve, and how are you going to win with those customers? At SIA, we've done lots of research in this area and know a lot about the different markets that are out there. It's no surprise that many of our fastest growing staffing firms, the ones that have grown over the last decade or two, have been in places like IT and healthcare, Those have been good strategic choices over the past decade. They're not the only choices to achieve growth, but that makes it easier in some ways. Now, strategy is as much about what you say yes to as what you say no to. And so picking a good strategy will make your job easier as a leader of a staffing business as you look to break through to the next stage. Now, the next discipline that we found across the board among the companies that we studied was the discipline of culture. Peter Drucker is rumored to have said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. What is culture? It's the unwritten rules and the self-reinforcing behaviors of an organization. You can often tell a culture by what happens when the boss isn't there. What do the leaders of the organization and the next level down permeate through the organization? Now, every organization has a culture. The question is your culture by design or by default? And is it a high-performance culture? The Department of Motor Vehicles has a culture. Is that the culture you want in your staffing firm? We've seen lots of examples of that. Folks like Jay Cohen at Signature Consultants with a great culture of accountability. Do what you say you're going to do. Or Cindy Paskey at Strategic Staffing Solutions. They're all green all the time with a strong culture of doing well by doing good and giving back. And importantly, culture is about deeds versus words. What you say is great, but people in your organization will take signals from who you hire, who you fire, who you promote. And almost to a one, these organizations that we studied have stories to tell about high performers who delivered lots of dollars to the bottom line, but were poisonous to the culture. Those people who were distracting from the culture, they weren't able to break through to the next level of growth till they moved those people out and were able to unleash the potential of the entire organization. So culture is key to growing a staffing firm and breaking through because it drives through the whole organization and allows you to leverage the vision of the leadership down throughout the business. Next up, and perhaps just as critical as culture, is talent development. How do you grow an organization? You've got to grow the capabilities of the next level of leaders and the leadership of the leaders below that. Companies like Allegis and others like that are perhaps most known for this discipline of hiring people right out of school, of training and developing them, of raising them up through the industry and promoting from within. If you talk to the folks at the top of Allegis, they'll say we're more of a leadership development organization than we are a staffing firm. So this whole idea really ties into the commitment and the sacrifice. My friend Mark Eldridge at Alcu probably said it best. When he thought about growing his business over time, the mantra was, when is the right time to hire? The right time to hire is when you've found the right person. That for him was regardless of budgets, current situation, but it was finding the very best talent to grow the business. That sort of focus on talent development is key to organizations that want to grow and have a sustainable business. Now, finally, we come to the discipline of execution. You know, this is the first place people go when they come and ask us questions. How do we grow? What comp plans should we have? What sort of processes should we have? All of that is important, but it's really critical that you've got these other disciplines in place. Having great processes and policies and tools, which is what execution is all about, if it's not on a foundation of a commitment to growth, a clear strategy, high-performing culture, and great talent development, it's not going to get you to the next level. So that's a little tidbit of what we found in our research and we're able to talk about in our book. So in summary, what's different about staffing firms who break through in growth? It's the skills and the discipline of the leadership team. Simple to say, really hard to do, and a big challenge for organizations over time. So we're going to now, that's just really the tip of the iceberg, And we're going to complete now the countdown of the skills most in demand in 2019 according to LinkedIn data. And then in a moment, I'll look forward to discussing the implications of this research and much more with my fellow panelists.
Welcome back, everyone. If you found any of those top skills surprising, please feel free to leave some comments for us and let us know what you thought. I also hope that Barry's talk sparked some ideas for you and you're able to take a few lessons from his research. But if you're like me, you're probably thinking, well, these all sound great, Barry. I love the simplicity of the research, but how do these actually work inside of agencies? And how can I put some of these practices in play within my own organization? Now, thankfully, we've invited a few special guests that are going to help us answer just that. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce our very first guest. His name is Adam Bleibtreu, and he's the Chief Marketing Officer for ASGN and Creative Circle. Adam, welcome to Strictly Staffing.
Brad, thanks for having me.
Can you do us a favor and share a little bit more about your background, your role, and one thing that's not on your LinkedIn profile?
Happy to. I came to the world of staffing from having been an entrepreneur. You can blame me for putting TV sets on gas pumps with a few partners I had years back. So we thought we'd entertain you at one of the least favorite moments of your day. I was introduced to the leadership at Creative Circle 6 years ago and really felt that they were smart and intuitive. I was fascinated by the culture they had built. So I joined that team. 3 years into that journey, we were acquired by what was then on assignment, now ASGN. And same thing, Peter and the leadership team he had built really, I thought, had very strong direction. And as a result of that, the unique opportunity to be the Chief Marketing Officer of both the parent brand, providing mentorship to the marketing leaders across the divisions, and then actually managing day-to-day activities of the marketing team at Creative Circle. As far as something that's not on my LinkedIn profile, my first real job out of college was working with Hanna-Barbera. And on Saturdays and Sundays, I was the man inside of the Scooby-Doo costume.
Like that. Wonderful. Well, you have a really diverse background, which is why we're so excited to have you today, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists.
To your left, I'd like to introduce Tammy Browning. So Tammy is Global Vice President of Operations at Kelly Services. And Tammy, can you do us a favor and share more about your role and one thing we would not know about you based on your LinkedIn profile?
All right, fair enough. Thanks for that, Brad. Happy to be here also. I am the Vice President and Managing Director of Kelly OCG, and I'm responsible for our global operations and our product management of our MSP, RPO, and our integrated staffing solutions. My organization makes up just about $8.3 billion in spend under management, 1,200 employees, and operating in 55 countries on any given day. Very complex. We're very proud of the Kelly organization and our brand, and really, quite frankly, more proud that we put someone to work every 30 seconds. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. And one thing not on your LinkedIn profile.
Not on my LinkedIn profile. When I entered the world of work many years ago, I challenged myself to take a job for commission only. And really a mano a mano, it was all about what money I could make for myself. And I sold artwork out of the trunk of my car and did that across the United States. And I promise you, if you have today a Mark King golf print of Augustus at 13 or Cypress Point somewhere hanging in your home, it might have very well been in my 1990 Ford Probe.
Yeah.
Well, we're lucky to have you, and we appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Glad to be here.
And Barry, of course, you no longer need an introduction, but I do want to thank you for distilling years of research into a 10-minute segment for us. But help our viewers understand one thing that might not be on your LinkedIn profile.
Well, I'll give you one thing is with a group of friends and I, we're working on, we love to cycle and have been working on biking from the Canadian border down to Mexico along the Pacific coast. So we've been doing it over a number of years, and so far have gone from the border down to Santa Barbara. Next summer we're going to finish from Santa Barbara down to Mexico. So having a lot of fun with that.
Wow, quite the accomplishment. And thank you again for joining us here.
Happy to be
So
here.
we're going to use the framework that you shared in the disciplines of top performing staffing agencies to lead our conversations with our panelists today. And our hope is to unpack some of the pragmatic sort of ways that these disciplines come to life within the organizations that both Adam and Tammy work for. So I'm going to start with you, Adam. One of the first disciplines that Barry shared was around the commitment to growth. And not many staffing agencies have a CMO. So even by way of that role, you can see that your organization is committed to growing. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you guys are approaching marketing and growth at your firm?
Absolutely. At the parent level at ASGN, growth is clearly an imperative and a strategic direction to pick the right areas to growth. So the marketing team helps strategy and leadership with defining opportunities, looking at paths to help get there. And growth can come in a variety of ways. It can come from internally in the teams that you build and how you manage them, as well as your top line and your bottom line. From Creative Circle's perspective, their culture and the focus we have in that marketplace has led to really some substantive growth there. The hardest part in a question like you're asking is to put your finger on one thing that says this is the direction we're going to go, this is the speed with which we're going to maintain to get there. If the world worked that way, I would be inviting you to my island somewhere in the Caribbean. It takes great leadership and it takes focus.
Wonderful, thank you. And Tammy, of course, Kelly being one of the pioneers in the space, you guys are no stranger to growth. Yeah. Share a little bit about how you guys are thinking about growth, and maybe to Adam's point, how you're thinking about disciplined growth for your organization.
So if I reflect back, Barry, on what you had shared early on and really looking at your 5 disciplines, I think from a large company, albeit a Kelly $5.5 billion, to a small company that could be 10 million or just under 100 million, we all run the risk of having challenges with respect to any one of those 5 disciplines. And so for me, I think when I think of the Kelly brand and what has differentiated us, what has got us where we are today, is that, one, our brand is one of the most recognized brands in our industry. Secondly, as you indicated, we pioneered the industry 73 years ago. Our founder was very passionate about the world of work and the world of temporary work, and he firmly believed that temporary work could change the way in which people worked. It could change the way in which people live. It could also change the way by which organizations acquired talent to get work done. And so when you think about the fact that he created a noble purpose, and our noble purpose was that we find work for people in ways that enrich their lives, at the end of the day, while strategies change, while industries change, while issues arise, the people, the leadership, I firmly agree and with my colleagues that it's about the leadership and the discipline to stay the course, because we cannot be all things to all people. At Kelly, we are very specialized. We know our specialties. We know what we're good at. We stay the course to that. It's commercial, light industrial, education, and scientific engineering. And we've stayed true to that all the way through, whether we place the resources or whether our supply chain places them.
Thank you. As I listen to you talk, and same with you, Adam, I can sense that it's very easy for you guys to articulate the purpose and the reason that you go to work every day. And definitely at LinkedIn, we take that very seriously, and it's a part of the DNA of our culture. Barry, I'm curious, with the firms that you studied in your book and your research, could you see a correlation between a well-articulated purpose and vision for these firms and their ability to improve the trajectory of their growth?
Absolutely. There's a high intersection between two of the research reports we produce every year, which is the fastest growing staffing firms, as well as the best staffing firms to work for. Many of the players who are on that fastest growing list are on the best staffing firms to work for, and that's no mistake. I think it's because this is a highly intense service business where people are key. And so getting engagement from your staff is critical. And the first place that starts is with the, having a reason for them to come to work every day, that they buy into the purpose, they buy into the vision. That's the first step in building a high-performing organization. And so there's a lot of overlap, I think, between those two things, and that's how you get started in really growing a business.
It's interesting, having spent most of my career in professional services organizations, whether it's staffing firms or other solutions providers, your people are essentially your product. Mm-hmm. And I believe strongly that your culture is then a reflection of the innovation that you provide and the experience that your customers have. And so knowing how important culture is to the success of business, Adam, can you share a little bit about how you guys think about culture at ASGN, one of the things you do to engineer the right outcomes?
I think without doubt, culture is the critical component to success. Regardless of the brand, from ECS all the way through cybercoders, our individual divisions have phenomenally strong cultures, and the leaders there have focused on it, daily. It's again, you can't put your finger on it and say, I'm going to go build culture, but what you can do is build a structure and an environment that culture can thrive in. And one of the key components to sort of feeding and watering it is purpose, direction, and discipline. So if you surround your opportunity with those components and feed it, culture will grow, and you can support it and you can help manage it. But it's the key driver to the success of our business.
And I think the proof is in the pudding for your business.
Yeah.
Barry, you put it pretty eloquently in saying that, culture by design frankly works better than culture by default. So Tammy, maybe you can talk about some of the cultural design or intentions at Kelly and how that's played a role in your growth and success as a business.
Yeah, again, I'm going to go back to our strategy and our purpose. When you think about Kelly, we have nearly 8,000 employees that work for us on a global basis. And when you think about how to drive culture through an organization where you can't actually have engagement day to day with every single one of those people, you have to really have a passion and a purpose that drives through. And at Kelly, we all, as we say, bleed Kelly green. And how we drive that through is really making sure that our strategy and our purpose is understood by all. And whether you're in a Kelly branch office, you can feel it, it's palatable. The teams understand that at the end of the day, we do a great thing. We find work for people in ways that enrich their lives. And that passion and motivation is what makes people get up in the morning and come to work and be phenomenal recruiters and phenomenal salespeople and really embrace our industry, which is really a phenomenal industry for all of us.
Thank you for that. At LinkedIn, we're fortunate because we're able to work with thousands of staffing agencies around the globe, big and small. Mm-hmm. And we can see that the ones that are investing in their people and harnessing the power of their culture are the ones that seem to be outperforming their peers, much like Barry described. But what we also hear from those same customers is that one of their biggest barriers to growth is skill shortages in the market. Frankly, that there is an imbalance of supply and demand for key roles in certain geographies. And that makes it difficult for them to be able to grow at the pace that they're looking for. So I know that this is a topic that SIA covers extensively. And we were fortunate to be able to sit down with John Nerthen recently in San Francisco, who's the executive director of global research at SIA. And he was interviewed by a colleague of mine, Kimberly Miller, who's senior director of search and staffing at LinkedIn. And they talked about how to overcome skill shortages to drive growth in the modern recruiting business. So let's take a moment and listen into what they had to say.
Hello, I'm Kimberly Miller, and I work for LinkedIn. I lead our search and staffing business, and I'm here in San Francisco with John Nerthen, the Executive Director of Global Research for SIA. John, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful. 25 years of experience. and a resource of so much information. What's the one thing that's not on your LinkedIn profile?
I guess one thing that surprises people is that I designed my wife's wedding dress.
That is wonderful. I'd love to see a picture at some point.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what your job entails at SIA as Executive Director?
Sure. So it's my privilege to lead our research team. So we have a team of people in California, also in London, and we use some freelance resources globally as well. So we are providing research for senior staffing executives on all aspects of the market, legal changes, developments in technology, any future trends in the market, anything that a senior executive would be interested in knowing about the staffing industry.
Our clients are telling us that the skills shortage is keeping them up at night. I imagine that you're seeing the same thing in your research at SIA. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we produce an annual report where we research staffing executives, and we ask them exactly that, what is your biggest concern? And talent shortages are easily the number one concern. More than 50% say that that's their primary concern.
Are you seeing anything specific in your research that would give us indication about industry, specific skill types, or geography?
Skill types, it's really across the board. I mean, you ask any staffing firm in any sector, do you have skill shortages? They'd say yes. If you look at geographies, actually the US isn't too bad. There are countries with a much worse demographic deficit, countries like Japan, Germany, Southern Europe in particular. So there are certainly regions that are struggling more, and looking at the predictions for the future, the expectation is those markets are going to get a lot worse. So staffing firms are going to have to get a lot more canny in the way that they're able to source talent.
What we're seeing with a lot of our clients today is that they're developing these massive training programs to reskill their workforce. Are you also seeing that at SIA?
Yeah, so again, from our staffing survey, we can see that 50% of staffing firms have some sort of training and development in place for their temporary workers. 13% are actually now providing a full day's paid training for temporary workers. And at the sharp end of the IT market, there are companies like Bleibtreu that, as part of their model, are providing an IT boot camp. Large staffing firms like Adecco have invested in General Assembly, a huge investment in training and development last year. Companies like Kelly have partnerships in this area as well. So I think over the next 3 or 4 years, training and development is going to be one of the key trends in the industry.
So let's talk about retention. Obviously, that's top of mind for our clients as well. What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, again, what we're seeing is that staffing firms are having to pay much more attention to it. It's difficult enough to source candidates, but once you've got them, you need to try hard to make sure you keep them. And one way that you can do that is by offering competitive benefits. And we've seen benefits increase since 2009. We've seen a big pickup since 2014. And what we've also seen, an interesting development, is it's not just staffing firms, it's forward-thinking clients such as Google, who have mandated that their contingent workers, independent contractors, temporary workers receive good benefits packages and are paid a minimum wage as well.
Investing in technology. Let's talk about that for a second. What are you seeing as an industry trend?
Yeah, so the great thing is, despite the skill shortages that we're seeing, staffing companies have access to new tools, new technology, advances in artificial intelligence, blockchain, big data, means that staffing firms are able to do things more efficiently and perhaps less expensively as well. So we actually monitor M&A, and in the past it used to be staffing companies acquiring other staffing companies. Since 2009 we've seen 200 acquisitions by staffing firms of non-staffing businesses. They've been investing in complementary businesses, and a lot of that has been talent acquisition technology. It's things like chatbots, it's things like online staffing platforms, which are nice complementary businesses for their main staffing business.
So we've talked a little bit about retention, investing in technology, and learning and development. What would be one last piece of advice that you would have for executives in the staffing industry?
Yeah, so it may sound obvious, but you have to be the best staffing company you can possibly be. That's the only way you're going to be able to outperform your competitors. I would have to say, use companies like LinkedIn, use companies like Staffing Industry Analysts. But seriously, it's important that you need to keep on top of these trends, because with the experience that I have, I can honestly say that the pace of change is accelerating at the moment. It's always been an interesting industry because things have always changed, but staffing firms are having to deal with so much change at the moment. So that would be my key advice, I think.
Wonderful advice. Thank you for sharing so much insight with us today.
Pleasure.
A special thank you to John for coming all the way over from London to share some of his perspective with us. I definitely encourage you all to follow John and his team's research at SIA. And certainly a thank you to Kimberly Miller for not only leading a compelling conversation, but also helping us have a little bit of fun in our studio in San Francisco. So there's a funny story that John shared off camera, and I hope he doesn't mind if I tell it to everybody on the internet. But in John's first role in a staffing agency, he did what we might refer to as some analog research. He would go and search through the rubbish bins of his competitors to find insights on candidates and clients that were hiring. And he shared how he was able to essentially start from the very, very bottom of digging through rubbish bins to make it into the role that he's in today. And so our panelists, while they may not be experts in digging through rubbish bins, certainly have their own unique paths to staffing as well. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you guys got into the business, starting with Adam.
It all began with an interest in people. I think that I came out of school in the early part of my career. It was a lot of focus on story and development of ideas through the entertainment industry, and then into being an entrepreneur. And what attracted me to the industry and what sort of led me down the path here is this intersection of how, as you've said about the core mission values that you guys have, providing a service to people that matters. And when I had the opportunity to meet ultimately the founders of Creative Circle, it suddenly made sense to me that a lot of the work I had done had been focused around that key component. How do you help make a little bit of the planet a better place? A key thing that my dad had taught me growing up. And it just seemed logical to suddenly wind up one day sitting in an office talking to a man who'd created the largest creative digital marketing staffing company in the United States. And it felt like it was the right place to be. The one thing I will say about having a diverse background in the business world is that when I'm confronted by problems or opportunities, it allows me to bring multiple perspectives to help solve the problem or find a solution. Not having grown up in a single industry has given me, I think, a tremendous advantage.
Yeah, I love that story. And I think we share similar diversity in our curving paths to getting into this sort of business. But similarly, one of the things that drew me to LinkedIn was our vision, which is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And the reason why I love working with staffing agencies is because you guys share that same goal. Mm-hmm. And we're almost able to exponentially accelerate our ability to achieve that by the work that you all do and the partnership that we have. So thank you for sharing. Tammy, would love to hear a little bit about your journey into staffing. You woke up one day and knew this was the business that you had to be in?
Yeah, something like that. Not really. I think like so many people, I was in a time in my life where I was looking for a career change, running restaurants, working 80 hours a week on many days. And so really I was looking for a change in career. So to date myself, I faxed my resume across a job ad in a newspaper, and I was called by Kelly Services, and in fact, the industry called to me. I was so intrigued by what it was that they were asking me to do. I asked more questions, and in fact, the role they were going to offer me was that of a temporary covering for somebody that was on maternity leave. And I took that risk and leap of faith because it was such an industry that drew to me. It called my name. And I took a risk of being a temporary, and in fact stayed a temporary employee for Kelly Services for 5 years before I jumped in with both feet. It gave me the opportunity to be a gig worker before the term gig worker existed. So I was a person that got to stay home and maybe go home a little early and watch my kids play baseball, or my daughter cheerlead, or my son play lacrosse. And so I was able to have that flexibility, which is the beauty of this industry.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And now every 30 seconds, you're helping another Tammy around the world achieve that same goal.
Absolutely right. Proudly. Yeah.
So Barry, similar to you, talk about how you got into this space.
You know, I was very interested coming out of school in service businesses and sort of saw that was the future. And you might guess this from somebody who does a lot of planning and analysis, I suppose. And I started blindly writing letters pre-internet to CEOs of service companies. Stumbled on one, Adia, which later became Adecco. Walked into the interview, didn't actually know what they did. But got hired as head of strategic planning and quickly discovered that this was an amazing industry with a great future. And so it's sort of been a terrific ride since then. And I sort of echo all of the things of like to have found a place that really is doing a great service to the world of connecting the people who need work with the work that's out there.
Something that John and Kimberly touched on in their video was the importance of learning and development. So as we continue to see talent shortages in the markets, staffing agencies in particular are trying to find new and creative ways to upskill their workforce or to help their candidates develop the skills they need to be placed in the roles that are best for them. I'm curious, starting with you, Tammy, how is Kelly thinking about upskilling their workforce or their candidate pool?
Yeah, just to kind of touch on the future of work, as we are in the driver's seat of that today with significant amount of research in terms of what's coming down the pipe around future of work and the labor dynamics changing and the economics change. So when what Kelly is doing and has been doing, and I should mention, we've been reskilling and upskilling people for 73 years. So this is not a new phenomenon. It's a reality that we face every day. The work is changing. The software changes. The industry is changing rapidly. And so what we do is we really invest in our staff, our people, our recruiters and our branches and our network to educate our candidate pool on what's available to them. Keep them engaged. Keep them on assignment. Redeploy them. Keep them involved so that we can make temporary work or any type of gig work a career for them long term. So it's really educating them on what's available out there. All major staffing firms have a platform by which to skill and train. Kelly is no different than that. We have upskilling courses and classwork that can be taken on an ongoing or daily basis. And we're really passionate about how do we take our temporary workforce and make them long-time career workers and really changing the way in which people look at temporary labor.
It's interesting because one of Barry's disciplines was around talent development. Mm-hmm. And as you share that story, it's just as important to be developing the talent inside your organization as it is to be upskilling and developing the talent that you're placing on behalf of your clients. Adam, I'm curious, as you think about learning and development, as you think about developing the future leaders inside your organizations or helping candidates in their last mile of finding work externally, how does GN approach learning and development and upskilling?
It's a great question, and I love the commitment that you guys have to the workforce that you deploy and helping them grow. I think that's critical for any of us in the industry to accept that as part of our responsibilities on a daily basis. Within ASGN and its family of brands, I think it's 2 or 3 key things. The first thing is every day the process remains fundamentally the same. You want to build great relationships with talent. You want to build great relationship with clients, and you want to effectively deploy and connect between those two. That fundamental principle doesn't change. The industries that you serve and the skill sets required, if you adhere to Moore's Law, just in the IT and the technology world alone, is going to double every 2 years. Mm-hmm. So you have to accept and embrace that, and then you have to build a training and development program to keep your employees up to speed. And by the way, that's at light speed. That's just to service the community in these fundamental components. The second piece is that employees have to feel valued to want to stay with a company. They have to feel like they're part of a culture. They have to feel like they're part of a team. And they need to know that there's a career path for them. If they don't want to be on the delivery side or they don't want to be on the sales side for the next 8 or 10 years, what can they do? Where can they go? How can they succeed? So we have really robust programs that identify emerging leaders early on and allow people to find a path over time. Or we've had some employees that for 10, 12, 13 years have been in the recruiting side and love it. We want to be able to accept and embrace both sides.
Yeah, and this is a requirement for modern recruitment businesses, not an option.
Yes.
Sounds like. So Barry, we've talked a little bit about the commitment to growth. We've talked about culture. We've talked about talent development. This all falls down if you can't execute, right? And you made that very clear. So I'm curious, of the firms you studied, do you have any insights or tips or best practices or nuggets that came out on the execution side of what allowed these businesses to deliver on some of these grand strategies, plans, or cultural ideals?
Yeah, I think, particularly if you think about small businesses that are trying to grow, they're figuring it out as they go. The ones who succeed are the ones who figure out what the best practices are in recruiting and sort of learn how to bottle that. So, they've got a way to capture those processes and procedures and see what the best recruiters do and, transfer that knowledge to others. If you can't make that knowledge transfer, like you've got an owner-operator, right, who's a great recruiter, if they can't explain that and put that in processes and procedures to teach the next level of people, you're never going to grow. And so the firms that grow have found a way to bottle that, to figure out what really works and disperse that through the organization. That's the only way to get to be a company like an ASGN or a Kelly.
Or to get operations in your title. So I feel like talking about the execution side of things, I'd be remiss, Tammy, if we couldn't get your perspective on this. So I'd love to hear from you, either what you guys are doing really well when it comes to executing on this, or advice that you would have for other staffing leaders that may be struggling to get the pieces together. And just following that question, we're then going to move to the live Q&A from our audience.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think I'm going to start by saying facts and data are the story, right? So we really look, and as much as we would love to hate it, it is a reality. We are a metrics-driven industry, and we really look at how we engage, how many people we call, how many phone calls we make, what is important to us from a metrics perspective, and how to drive that culture of accountability. So it's really about the facts and the data, and not only will the facts and the data tell you whether you're successful, they'll tell you if your strategy is working, if people are engaged, if they're making money, if they're feeling good about their careers. So it's really relying on the data that tells the story around accountability.
Well, that's a good lead into some of the questions that I saw coming in from our live stream. So we're going to move to those in a moment. For anybody that's watching, if you want to share your questions or comments in the box, feel free. We're going to have the next 5 or so minutes to be able to get to a few of those questions. But one of the very first that I saw come through are around metrics, as you described. So, Adam, what somebody is wondering here is, what are the metrics you care about most? And, of all the things you can measure and monitor, what are the best indicators of performance or growth for your organization?
Across the board, again, depending on which of the divisions we're talking about, IT, creative, life sciences, inflow, relationships that they're building with clients, outbound metrics related to, calls, connects, and those kinds of things. But I think the most important one today for success in our industry is fill rate, is your capacity to put the highest number of qualified people to work at one time, and identifying the metrics around how you're identifying and pre-qualifying the talent, and then the process with which you're submitting them. And obviously on the VMS or the MSP side, you've got issues on a hiring manager direct. You've got other opportunities or issues, but I think that would be the focus that I would bring. And just one last thing to comment on the facts and data that you'd had before. I couldn't agree more, but I think the key component, is the former entrepreneur on the panel, is patience. Yeah. You have to understand that data is going to tell you a set, and it's going to define a timeline that results are measured in, and have the discipline to be patient for the duration of that before you can actualize and react to results.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, that's excellent feedback. I appreciate that. Now, we talked about culture. Barry, you talked about creating a high performance culture, and you both indicated that in your organizations it's paramount to your success. The flip side to performance is accountability, just as you were describing. So I'm curious at Kelly, this is a question that came through, how you balance sort of culture and accountability in a way that still feels good for your team, but of course drives towards your goals and objectives.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud to say Kelly has one of the longest tenures of any industry in terms of the people that stay at Kelly for years, in some cases 30, 40, 50 years. It's not uncommon to find that at Kelly. And so with that, they don't stay because they're not driven. They stay because they believe in the passion, they believe in our purpose, and they believe in our noble purpose. But they also are accountable. They understand that at the end of the day, their job is to meet the needs and demands of our clients and to meet the needs and the demands of our candidates. And, we've spent a lot of time understanding that, creating customer councils and advisory councils and temporary councils and workforce councils that help us drive, how does accountability drive through an organization, and what can we do to be more of an action-oriented company. So everybody at Kelly really thrives on action orientation that's directly aligned to our noble purpose, regardless of the role that they sit in.
And I think your ability to rally around customers is one of those
100%.
Softer edges that really, I think, probably allows you guys to perform, and certainly something near and dear to my heart. There's a dozen questions here that are in the queue, so I'm going to try and prioritize a few of them. There's one in particular that is certainly a hot button topic, so I might go all the way down the panel on this one, and it's around remote work.
Yeah.
So, Barry, I'll get your thoughts briefly, and then I want to hear how this works in practice. In the organizations that you've studied, partner with, or current customers of yours, have you seen anybody that's cracked the code on the ability to lever a remote workforce in a way that provides flexibilities for their employees, but also still allows them to, hold them accountable and build the culture that they desire in their organization?
I think it's a great question, because it's proof that, what worked in the past isn't necessarily going to be the thing that's going to drive you, forward into the future. So the firms that we studied, I would say the dominant thing was, they sort of resisted remote work, and they were really big on culture and, putting people into sort of large offices where they're driving, because the culture and the mutual accountability was so key. I think that's been the way many of these companies have grown. But going forward, given the war for talent that's out there, I think that the organizations are just going to have to learn to get much better at remote work. And with all the technology that's out there now, the video technology and all of that, it's going to get easier and easier. But it takes a new set of skills to learn to manage in that sort of environment. But we are hearing about staffing firms who are starting with innovative models that are like remote only, no offices, and I think that's going to be one of the waves of the future.
Well, I'd like to combine two questions for Tammy. You talked about in your previous presentation and here that you got to hire the right people, and when the war for talent being as it is, it's very difficult to find the folks with the right ethic, with the right cultural tenets. Mm-hmm. So Tammy, I'm curious both how you think about hiring for work ethic and talent, which is what one of our viewers is asking, and then also how that translates into how you think about a flexible work environment for those employees.
I'm going to start with a flexible work environment, and I'll end on the question around the talent themselves. But when you look at Kelly just in general, we're very proud. We went to a Kelly Anywhere program, which really means Kelly Anywhere. You can work from anywhere in the world, about 2.5 years ago. Although that's not a one-size-fits-all strategy, right? Not all skill sets, not all levels of talent, not all roles can be remote. And so when we look, for example, at our corporate infrastructure, it makes a lot of sense to have an anywhere style. And in fact, I will tell you 85% of the people that work for me and in my organization are remote, and absolutely are remote. If we look at our global talent solutions recruiting, our centralized recruiting organization, all are remote. These are recruiters that are young in their careers. They have a very robust training program that really assimilates people those recruiters into their jobs. But what they've done, and which is very unique, is they've created an online community, a Skype-like environment where they can communicate ongoing, regularly on a day-to-day basis, even things that keep it fun, right? This industry is about having fun and energy and passion. And in that world, they may actually, at the end of the day, have a virtual happy hour with each other. And it goes over really well, and the staff is engaged. It's probably one of the best remote working environments I've seen. But from a more skill growth perspective, I think, which was the first part of your question, the talent themselves, ourselves that we employ, we've made a pivot. We've shifted significantly in the way that we look at talent. And even take my own career, for example. I didn't come from the industry and sit today as an executive in the company. So we've taken a very close look at growing and grooming our own. We look more for passion. We look more for drive. We look more for energy. We look at how they've behaved in their life in terms of things that they've accomplished. And we don't look for industry experience so much anymore, because really growing and grooming people into our industry has proved to be more successful. Now, in our specialty and our niche areas, in terms of our science, engineering, and education, we do look at people with industry knowledge, but more we're then looking at subject matter expertise. Do they bring the background? Do they bring the culture? So it's not a one size fits all. It really is a cultural shift within a company.
But, it's clear that the world of work is changing, and it's clear that you guys are adapting to help put your employees in a position to do their best work. But as Barry mentioned, the sort of thread that binds here is technology. I mean, that's what gives us the ability to work in ways that we've probably never worked before. Right. So, Adam, I'd like to hear quickly from your perspective. As an executive, it can be daunting to think about all the different technology solutions and flavors of the day and whiz-bang ideas to put in place in your organization. How do you guys make decisions about what technology investments you choose to make and don't make, and how do those empower your staff to do their best work?
Oh, that's just a great question. The determinations about technology take place at a variety of levels that are commensurate with the magnitude of rollout across division, single division, et cetera, which comes with an implied cost. At the ASGN level, at the parent company level, we have a strategic team that focuses purely on technologies to identify emerging or existing technologies. Each division also in their own right identifies and explores technologies that they feel are relevant. So we have a top-down and a bottom-up component, and I sort of sit in both the operating entity and at ASGN. But the key is that technology doesn't solve your problem. Technology is merely a means to an end. And I really love the fact that you're talking about this virtual Skype thing, because as social animals, which what the species we are fundamentally, you have to use technology to your advantage. You can't be ruled by technology. We still have to find it and deploy it as appropriate to each business model.
Thoughtful, thank you. So here's what we're going to do. We're at the conclusion of our show, but we have 10 seconds each per panelist to share one piece of advice with the staffing community to help them think about driving growth in their business. So I think I'm going to start back with you, Adam. Come back down the line. What's one thing that you might recommend that other agency executives consider on their growth journey?
No pressure over here. Thank you. I think it's really two things. I think it's dedication and focus, and you have to combine the two with a high degree of patience. It doesn't happen overnight. You'll wake up one day successful if you're very focused and you're dedicated to it.
And I'll say Adam and I are aligned on that. So for me, I think it's stay the course, right? Strategy is not something that happens overnight. And I think all too quickly, our industry, sadly, good, bad, or indifferent, is a growing P&L driven industry. And what happens if the P&L doesn't resonate very, very quickly, people pivot too quickly and they move away from strategy before they can actually see it to fruition. So stay the course, stay aligned to your strategy, and most importantly for me, hire the right people and keep them happy.
Barry, aside from reading your book and following SIA's research, what's one piece of closing advice?
Yeah, I think that if they're looking to grow, I'd really make sure that you're focused on talent development and high performance culture. So to me, that's really the key thing that differentiates those that grow from those that don't. Is you've got to build up that talent. You've got to make sure that they've got a culture that's going to drive success.
Thank you. Well, I owe all three of you a great debt of gratitude for joining us today. Your candor and transparency and thinking and experience is such a valuable asset for us and hopefully for our viewers as well. I also want to give a special thanks to our LinkedIn Media Productions team. Without them, we wouldn't be able to bring this to you all live. And thanks to our audience. We want to continue to learn and grow from this program. We want to continue to add value and perspective to the staffing community and help our customers and others think about how they can drive growth in their business. So please leave your feedback. Let us know how we can think about evolving future shows, topics we can cover, and ways that we can make sure that we're delivering on that. And until next time, I thank you very, very much for joining us, and cheers.